into our own hands. Educate ourselves and take a stand. We're gonna occupy your street, your house, your bank accounts, your everything, yes, everything. Oh, we're here to occupy. I know we feel it's time we occupy. Hey, yeah. I reckon it's a revolution.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Moral Economy. I'm one of your hosts, Eddie.
And I am one of your other hosts, Navaz.
There are 5 hosts today. I swear, we need other words besides hosts, you know?
Co-hosts.
Co-host, chief. Was I chief last time? Chief.
I mean, we could say panel members.
Interlocutor or whatever. How do you speak that?
Anyways, this is Shell.
And I'm Shell. I'm a host.
Shell's a host, and I'm also a host, Andrew.
And I'm Frat.
Today,
And that's convenient.
today we're going to be talking about guns, the U.S., so the gun culture, and we're also going to talk about Hannah Arendt, The Banality of Evil. And also, we're going to mention maybe some words about the recent terrorist attacks in Ankara, Istanbul, and Brussels, which happened this morning.
And all the other places that we hypocritically live right
That
now.
we leave out.
Yeah.
because We're not well informed enough to know
Yeah.
of where all the
Because
terrorists
and so many things are happening, right, all at once.
Of course.
So for that, let's I guess have a 30 seconds of silence. Is
Yeah.
that about fair? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's 30 seconds. Where do we start? Do we want to start the show first with you? Or
Yeah,
should
we
we
can start with mine.
Yeah,
Mine's
start with
kind of
Shell.
just like a little prelude kind of thing because it's not so long and it's not scripted. I'm just going to chat about stuff. So the topic is guns in the United States. And, I was thinking recently, in light of all of the shootings and it's a very political issue at the moment. Everybody's talking about it. I was thinking, why is it that there's a fairly large part of the people in the United States who really love their guns? There's a huge support for guns. Lots of people are like, I want my gun, and I'm just trying to sort of puzzle this out. What could be an explanation for this this love of guns in the United States? And the conclusion that I came to after thinking about it for some time is that it's sort of a reaction to a contradiction that many people in the United States are unwilling to acknowledge. Yeah, and the contradiction is between the official rhetoric in the United States, a rhetoric that is heavily loaded with freedom, the idea of freedom, words, freedom, just freedom, and the actual lived experience of many Americans, which, in my opinion, is rather unfree. That they don't feel this kind of freedom. Yeah. So it's my belief that many Americans so they're unwilling to recognize this contradiction. They believe so strongly in the idea of American freedom and American exceptionalism and how special we are and free we are and how historically unique we are, that they're unwilling to recognize the fact that they're actually not free. Right? So you might say now, but Chow, what the fuck are you talking about? Of course Americans are free. We're the freest people ever. We're the most free that ever existed in the history of mankind.
I believe a study was done in New Zealand is the freest country in the world.
Well, it's they were wrong. It's America.
Yeah.
And I must be crazy for saying that people are unfree. But I can be a little bit more specific. So what do I mean when I mean freedom? What do we talk about when we talk about freedom? Because we love to say the word, but how often do we sit down and reflect upon what it means to be free?
Which we don't do much of because we don't study philosophy in schools in America. It's a very philosophical question.
It's a philosophical question, indeed. Well, you studied philosophy.
That's one American out of the
You're a philosopher.
30 minutes.
Philosophy in its most practical sense, by the way.
Yeah, in its practical sense, and it's and I want to I think even in okay, it's also philosophical, but just from the perspective of these people who love guns, I think that there's a confusion over what it means to be free and how that translates into actual lived experience. For
A
these people.
disconnect.
There's a disconnect, yeah, and so good. So some examples of what it means to be free. So there's some sort of tongue-in-cheek examples, but I think they're also rather important. Living in Germany, one of the things that I really like about this country is, for example, the bars don't close at a certain time and I can drink on the street, right? And again, this seems rather trivial, but in the lived experience of day-to-day people, that's pretty important because we like to drink and we like to go out and party all night long. And in the United States, at 1:30 in the morning, in most places, they turn on the lights and say, last call, everybody get the hell out, go to bed. You're children and you probably have to wake up early tomorrow and work because you're adults.
To be fair, it's not the case where I'm from, but okay.
Yeah, but in many places, there are some exceptions.
Certainly not
like-
free.
Yeah. So and this is something that for millions and millions of Americans is part of the lived experience of being an American. You go home early and you're only allowed to drink in certain designated drinking areas. So again, this is
You have to drive there.
and you have to drive there, which is weird. So the buses don't run. But there's another perfect example.
Right.
Public transportation.
Public transportation.
You don't get it very much in the United States, which means that if you don't have a car, it's really hard to get from one place to another. Whereas at least in European cities, in the bigger cities, they generally have very extensive and very reliable public transportation nets. So I'm free to travel around my city, and this is a day-to-day thing. This affects me all the time. I would not want to have a car here because, in a sense, I feel the car would be more limiting to my freedom.
Not only in the cities. Like I've been in the country extensively in Germany, and there are buses.
But not to Pisselberg.
Yeah, not to Pisselberg.
But so for example, there's another
Pisselberg.
good example. Yeah, another aspect of freedom is economic freedom. This is another thing we love to talk about in the United States. Economic freedom, upward mobility, which is more of a myth than a reality at this point. But that's kind of besides the issue. In Europe, again, to contrast with Germany especially, for example, higher education is free or mostly free, which means that when you finish university, you're not shackled to a huge amount of debt, which means that you're free, having graduated from the university, to pursue something that you would like to pursue. You don't have to immediately join the workforce and sell your soul to some nameless corporation for the next 40 years and in order to pay your student
First
loans.
pay
and
off your
stuff.
debt and then pay off all the other debts you accumulate.
You accumulate while trying to pay off the
Yeah.
first debt,
Yeah.
and so we have a kind of debt slavery model thing going on in the United States. It might be a little bit harsh to call it that, but it really, I think that significantly limits the freedom of Americans because so many people. We have some of the highest household debt in the world, and that when you're looking at this, when you look at your bank account and you're negative $2,000 or $80,000. That severely limits your options of what you can do with your life and has a major impact on the lived experience of being American. Yeah. So there's many examples like this, but what does all of this have to do with guns? Well, guns have a very special property, and that is one, most places in the world you're not allowed to have guns. And two, you can hold them. You can have them in your hand. They make you feel powerful. They're this tangible, tactile object, and it's very easy to then sort of instead of focusing on this disconnect between the rhetoric of freedom and the feeling of unfreedom, it's easy to ignore it and just focus on the material object, the gun, and say the gun is, for me, freedom. As long as I have my gun, I'm free. And this sort of reconciles this contradiction. Because Americans, they somewhere in the back of their minds, they know, or even if they don't know, somewhere unconsciously, they are unfree. They are living this unfree experience. But the guns, they say, well, I am free. I'm free because I'm free to have a gun. And this gun is a symbol now of my freedom. Yeah? And so I think that the issue with gun control and all of this goes much deeper than just, killing people and do guns kill people or do people kill people and all of this crazy stuff that we hear all the time. I think the issue is much more significant, namely that Americans are, in a very important way, not free. And that if we could somehow make it into an actually free place, people would be far less attached to their guns. If every day they felt like, today I'm free to do as I please, I live according to what I want to do and not according to what I have to do, then maybe guns would fall out of popularity. And that was just all of my thinking on guns.
I'd like to add, it's not only having the gun that's like a tangible object of freedom, but also the exercise thereof is using the gun.
Yeah,
right? Hunting and
shooting
shooting stuff.
old cars.
And I want to add 2 cents as well. Makes me think that it's also a freedom from fear. A few podcasts ago, we spoke about the propaganda model, Chomsky's propaganda model. And the last filter that is used, so to speak, by the media is this overemphasis on fear. We always have to be afraid of something. And I think that is very limiting to our freedom. If we're afraid, we're going to act differently. And what guns do is that it's a way to make us feel safer.
Yeah,
it's a way that somehow makes us free.
One point of this is that gun sales went through the roof, when Obama went into office, and rightist militancy out as well, because they felt that their freedom was threatened because, of course, they were told by the propaganda model that they were.
We are constantly in a state of fear, and the media pushes this. I mean, they run with it. It happened today with Brussels. They just they panic everyone pretty much. Terrorism before used to be the Soviet Union, where we have to be afraid. We always have to be ready, and guns are our solution. And it's really a pity because in the end, small children suffer from it.
And other people are less free because of it too.
I think
there's a big part of it.
I would just like to add, there's also this other, I think a background feeling of this tangible object gun, it gives you immense power. And the power being that you can now, act God. You can take lives away. And this act in itself is very empowering. It's, I don't know, it's maybe controversial to say this, but the fact that, you pull the trigger and someone just stops living, that itself, just the knowledge of this thing, you may not do it. I don't say that everybody who owns guns is some nefarious, I don't know, whatever, killer, or murderer for that matter. But the knowledge of this thing itself is very empowering, I would say. Well, this is where, people could psychologically reconcile their lack of liberation in everyday life experience and their everydayness. But, the fact that they go back home and check their drawer, they have a Glock over there, they feel
everything's
that now,
gonna be okay,
everything's going to be okay. If there is a harm to my person, I can just take lives away.
There's also another related to this, the psychological aspect of. I'm sure we've all felt. I know I have. I felt like I've wanted to punch people, right?
I feel like I want to punch you all the time.
Yeah, right. but the feeling goes away. But sometimes the feeling does actually stay. But that's because at least for most of us, punching, however, is the only sort of thing we have. But if you have a gun in your hands, then you get the obsessive feeling that you want to shoot people. And what happens then, of course, is big school shootings or going into a crowded theater and shooting people. And so having this tangible gun that changes your psychological state.
And it makes it so much easier to, exercise your freedom to hate people, freedom to despise people.
Yeah.
And it objectifies it in a very simple way, I would say, Psychologically speaking, if I hate, I don't know, moviegoers, and I have a gun, what other better way to express my freedom of hating them than just barging in the theater and shooting them all dead?
Yeah, you can use that kind of rhetoric for anything.
You could. That's what I'm saying, yeah. That's probably one of those liberating experiences that Shell was just telling us about, that guns give ordinary Americans, I would say.
I mean, there's also another side to this, though. However, I mean, I'm against guns. However, Frat and I have been talking on and off about violence and the left. And one point you made, for instance, or we talked about, was the Black Panther movement. They hadn't been armed and militant. What effect would they have had? And I realize that's a very controversial thing to say, and yet it's true.
Well, Martin Luther King appears so peaceful.
Yeah.
In the absence of the Black Panthers.
Yeah, but there are, armed leftist struggles in the world. There have been.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, just a matter of how do you exercise the ideology that you profess or you pursue.
There you go. Arm the left, but nobody else.
No, the left is armed. The left has been armed in parts of the world. They have, the left has been armed in its own ways.
And there is the argument that all social movements have always had a wing that are armed on the left, and there wouldn't have been any kind of change without this armed aspect to it.
Well, I guess the reason I wanted to bring that up is because we're not like having a blanket, we hate guns because, we find them bad.
This is exactly what
yeah.
Shell is trying to tell us,
Yeah.
that you locate the ownership of guns in a particular
Yeah.
social context that you find in America, and the particular
Yeah.
rhetoric that surrounds the ownership of guns, that it is one of your freedoms that you exercise as being an American, the Second Amendment, and what have you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that only by means of commodifying the guns themselves.
Yeah.
There is this huge market for
Oh, yeah.
guns.
Big
Let's not
one.
forget
Yeah.
that.
That's where the relationship between freedom and guns comes into play, because in the market you exercise your legal freedom.
Well, I mean, many different ways freedom is commodified,
And that
So
is
guns,
one reflection of
yeah.
it.
through your
Yeah.
free time, whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
I do not disagree with that. On
Cool.
on that note,
Yeah,
I
let's
would
do Hannah
begin
Arendt.
with a quote. Yeah, I would begin with a quote from Hannah Arendt. She says in her notes on revolution, or which of these works was it? I don't know which of these works was
Origins
it.
of totalitarianism, probably?
I don't know, but the quote is really moving. It says, "Men are free as long as they act, neither before nor after. For to be free and to act are the same." So, in this way, I could totally connect this, in what Shell was saying, that this action of owning a gun is an exercise in freedom. But yes, we are now going to be talking about Hannah Arendt.
Right before you go a little more into that, I think there is a dual comment on that. That act is defined in opposition to behavior. And what we do in the market is we behave, we don't act really. And I think that's what Hannah Arendt is getting at.
Yeah. I mean, the philosophical point that she's trying to touch in is that, freedom is not just an abstract idea. It is embodied in political expression. So, in that sense, we have to act on our freedom. In the
So act in the full intentional sense.
Yeah, in the
of-
Kantian sense that you act as if you're free, and this action is how you express your freedom.
Yeah.
Right, and certainly if you're not acting, but you claim to have all sorts of freedom that that modernity has given us.
I have a question. Can you tease out a little bit more behavior then?
Well, behavior will be exercise of freedom in very defined terms. We discussed about this also in Pisselberg, that when you go on to the market and exercise your freedom, there are certain limits on that you cannot buy things legally in market, you cannot buy them in more than certain quantities, but so on and so forth. But acting is different from behaving in the sense that there is more of a genuine quality to it, that there is nothing prescribed about it. While on the other hand, behavior is more of a prescribed kind of action.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like this idea. It's tied to the idea in economics of the human being a sort of a black box, and we have revealed preferences, and what happens is we have an input of some sort, and we behave, and that behavior is because of our input, and that behavior then becomes our preference.
A little more deterministic, it
Yeah.
sounds.
Yeah. But let's do.
Let's go there.
Yeah. So Hannah Arendt was of Jewish German origin, and then she later on moved to the States after the National Socialist Party took over Germany. And we're just trying to we are not trying to divulge, or let's say discuss all of her work. That is too much to be discussed. But it's specifically the question that I was talking to Andrew some time ago, and it was about this notion that she has of the banality of evil, the banality of evil, that evil is so ordinary, so everyday. And this was particularly when she went to cover the trial of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem. Eichmann was the architect of the Endlosung, the final solution of the Jewish question of the Hitler's party. And there now Arendt, just to take all of our listeners, yes, all 6 of you, through this, how I would put this in her intellectual universe. She started off. She is totally, as I said, with this quote that freedom and action. So she was very occupied with the question of the political, and she was one of the first thinkers to systematically theorize totalitarianism, which she thought was a total new way of government that was built upon terror and ideological fiction. Now, this and she has examples of herself, fleeing away from Nazi Germany, and this is what made this question very personal to her as well. Now, when Eichmann was captured in Argentina, in the 1960 by Israeli agents, and was then extradited to Israel to be put on trial to crimes against humanity, she offered her services to the New Yorker and penned a series of articles, which was called Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil, which was later put together in a book as well. Now, in her work on totalitarianism and her earlier political work until 1963, when she came out with this book and with this series of articles, she spoke of totalitarian regimes as a manifestation of radical evil. But it was something that you see changing in her work when she encountered Eichmann. Now, this is very controversial. Her articles, as a disclaimer, have been very controversial, anti-Semitic, borderline, whatever. But I think she makes a very good point. And why so? Is because that when she sat in Jerusalem and observed Eichmann providing defense, now you would assume that this person who has blood of 6 million Jews, 5 million Jews on his hands, would be some kind of a demon, a demonic personality, some personification of evil. But what she saw in that courtroom was somebody that she, as he put it in German, was nicht einmal unheimlich. So he was not even sinister. He was just an ordinary bureaucrat. And that is exactly what he spoke of. All the cliches, all the bureaucraties that he used in his defense. And he said that was the only language he knew. The Amtssprache. That's it. Now this is where she comes out with this notion of banality of evil. And let's be very clear about this, that it is not the crimes that he committed, the Nazi horrors of destruction and devastation of Europe and killing of millions of people, that was not, banal. It certainly is not. She is not thinking of the crimes as banal, but it's this action. It's this motives. It's the motives which were banal. Adolf Eichmann was motivated just by careerism. This was a man who had never had, prior to joining the SS, never had a proper job in his life, and this was his only chance to succeed. It was just plain bureaucratic careerism, and this is what she also referenced to in her articles, that one of the most astonishing things about him was that he was not even an anti-Semite. He did not hate the Jews. He just wanted to progress his career, and this was just a job that was given to him. And that is what he was doing. Now this, when we think about this, and her critique of this is that Eichmann, never exercised his ability to think and to judge. He was a part of the process that just executed certain orders that were given to them, and he was trying to be as good as that as he could in order to advance his careers, and this is where she faults him, that he was not even in thinking in that sense. It was the non-thinking, it was the failure to think that was banal, that he was just not even considering what he was doing, what his actions would implicate, what were the implications of his actions going to be. He was not even considering that, because she thinks that had he thought about it, and thinking not in the sense that he did not know what was happening, but thinking in the more reflective way, of when you think and you judge, you think and you rationalize, you talk to yourself, this sort of a thinking. And this sort of end of thinking, this sort of death of thinking, was what she thought was banal. That nobody thinks anymore. Modernity has provided us with, and this is again, this is something that comes in her philosophy, the whole methods of modern organization that she draws from her mentors, Heidegger and Jaspers and other people, you know, in the phenomenological tradition, that, you know, this notion, this notion of how modernity has put us in positions in organizational structures where we're totally devoid of thinking, where we don't have to think at all to be able to do whatever that we're doing and to be able to be good at that. Now, Eichmann for certainly was good at what he was doing. You know, he was doing the shameful acts that he was doing. He was really good at that. But then he was not exercising his capability to think and to judge, because if, you know, she thinks that if, you know, thinking in the sense that, you know, when you think about yourself, you implicate yourself as a human being, again phenomenological, that you're a part of the plurality of human beings, of the we. The I is always a part of the we. And when you stop thinking about the I does not reflect on itself. Then the I stops being a part of the we. And this is also, you know, her analysis of totalitarianism and logical fiction, that how they separate the I from the we. How, as a part of ideology, you know, you dehumanize, you demoralize humans, a category of humans at least, and then think of yourself as something else. In this case, it was racial superiority with the Nazis, that they were a different race and Jews were some sort of inferior race whatsoever. And this, you know, sort of thinking and exercising judgment is what she takes him at fault. And this was, again, like I said, you know, when she comes out with this article, it was totally controversial. But now this is, Eichmann was involved in this. She does not think that, you know, Eichmann was not involved with this, or somehow that, you know, he could be absolved of his responsibility into whatever that he was doing. But then, you know, it's this notion of not thinking that, you know, the human dimension of this activities is not taken into place. Like I said, the whole I and the we is put apart. Yeah. So the banality of evil is not an expression that refers to Eichmann's deed, right? There was nothing banal about this. But the banality of evil was his motives and his intentions, as I just mentioned. His motives were not wicked, were not evil. And this is what struck her, and this is what motivated her later work. Right? And even, I think, one of the instances when Eichmann defended himself as saying that he always acted on the categorical imperative, you know, he always acted on the categorical imperative, she faults him. She comes out and says that he does not even have the school kid's understanding of what the more categorical imperative means, because that the categorical imperatives, you know, impinges it has central the idea of your freedom to exercise your own moral judgment and not follow orders blindly. And this is what, you know. So Eichmann, you know, he was failed. He certainly did fail his capacity of thinking, of having an internal dialogue with himself, which might have, you know, permitted him to take an account of the evil deeds that he was doing. But and yeah, I was reading that, you know, her indictment of Eichmann sort of goes beyond the man. She was trying to, you know, by attacking modern institutions, she was trying to go beyond the man and attack modernity in the sense that, you know, it like I said, it displaces us from our actions of thinking and to be able to judge for ourselves. We're just a part of the process, you know. It really, it does matter. Of course, we know what we're producing, but, you know, when you look at it, the process is the same. If you're producing, I don't know, cars or corpses or gas chambers for that matter, you know, it's the same. That, you know, he was organizing. He was doing the most banal of the tasks, organizing transport, you know, optimizing transport to fit people into it. You know, that sort of bureaucratic assignments that he was doing. And this was it. And this was something that, you know, she takes him to be at fault for, something that he never realized what he was doing, because he was not exercising his inability. He was not exercising his ability to think, and yeah, it was quite what she said. As he said, he exercised a curious, quite authentic inability to think. And again, thinking is in the very let's say Arendtian terms. When you think, you put yourself in the plurality of I and the we, and you think, and you then on this basis of this thinking, you judge your actions. You exercise. You talk to yourself. You engage yourself in the sort of reflective rationalization of what you're doing and what could this mean. And this is exactly why, because when there's a crime committed, one of the first things that that the prosecutors would try to establish is whether or not this person had the intentions to commit this crime, right? Now, this was the case with Ashman. This was one of the biggest findings that she comes out with this thing, that he does not seem to have been motivated by his hatred for the Jews or by his intention to kill them. It was just that he never had the motives, but he was just doing what was told to him, what was ordered.
He wasn't acting; he was simply behaving.
Yeah, he was not acting in that sense that he was exercising his freedom, and this freedom implies that you're free to think and exercise your judgment for yourself and not just follow orders in that sense. Yeah. So why this matters today to us, this notion of banality of evil, this notion of that how normal people in their everyday lives, decent citizens, even respectable political leaders, can commit monstrous deeds. This is particularly because the bureaucratic and technological conditions of modernity make this phenomenon a much more likely and dangerous possibility. Now, this does not mitigate the accountability that these people might have for their deeds, but again, they should be held accountable for this, and they should be sort of engaged in their in activities that they do. So it's really you see this happening today, when policies made in Washington encourage terrible abuses in Abu Ghraib, right? And when more lawyers working for the American government come out with ingenious ways of legalizing torture, you really cannot put them. You can in that institutional way put this on them, but again, in their ways, in their everydayness, what they're doing is they're just doing their job as lawyers, and the legislators are doing their work as legislature, reading whatever bills and sending them off. Yeah, and it's just that these difficult and painful questions of the meaning of evil in today's world, where nobody really listens to their conscience, nobody really exercises this thinking, judging, putting us in that plurality of I and them. And this is what makes this, I think, very relevant to us, because this, like I said, when all that you need to do is you distance yourself, the I distances itself from the we. So again, in today's world, in what we were just talking about, in the sort of freedom as consumption, freedom as being able to consume and in a prescribed manner by neoliberal capitalism, there is an easy rhetoric of separating the I from the we. This I could be something that is not an immigrant or a colored person, and that they're all put to the we, and they're just dehumanized, and then the I can do whatever the I wants to do, without reflecting, without including this we in the whole equation of when the time to judge is there, when you think and you judge about what you're going to do. So yeah, what we cannot eliminate in this post-totalitarian era is banished from our consciousness, banished from our consciousnesses. These people are made invisible by not looking, and unthinkable by not thinking. And these people could be the others. The others could be, I don't know, immigrants, refugees, colored people, women, people with a different sexual orientation, people with different religions, people with, that are just different. Yeah, and this is why I think this sort of matters to us today, that we think and we decide what we want to do, and this is what makes us free. And this is where it's totally banal, this evil that we commit without thinking about it, in our daily lives, in our everyday processes. I don't know, people working for government organizations, people deciding on, to use an example, on asylum applications, they are in a way, I don't know, sort of committing evil, but they're following the law,
If I can jump
Yeah,
on,
sure.
on this, you just made that point, in government institutions. I think, obviously there's been a lot of resistance from the Jewish community, at least at the beginning, against Hannah Arendt, but also from our political elites. And I think because what it sends as a message is that evil isn't this, picture that we always have in our minds, but evil is exactly when we look around our system, our oppressive system. It doesn't look any different than our oppressive system, and it's obvious then why political elites wouldn't want us to know that.
Exactly. That is I think why we could totally apply this on big multinationals, who engage in, I don't know, child labor,
Production of
unable,
products.
sorry,
The production of products.
the production of process
consumption
that,
of
because they are just producing something and people are engaging in this process, be they kids, be they, I don't know, less than minimum wage earning people, right? But this is not evil in the sense that these people are I don't know, monsters or whatever.
Yeah, no,
They're just doing,
you just don't
exactly,
see the evil.
Exactly.
You can't
They
see.
don't-
That's why
they don't also see it because
Yeah.
they also don't know
Yeah.
what exactly, and they're capable of thinking in that sense that what they're doing and what are the consequences of this thing going to be. So they're not putting that I and we perspective on themselves. That what I do here, how is it going to impact other people who are sitting in a different country.
And I think this connects well with the concept of fetishism. Or the idea, the example I always gave is of like sneakers. I always have a problem buying sneakers because I love sneakers, but at the same time, it's hard for me to find sneakers that aren't produced in Vietnam or Indonesia or wherever, where they don't have great labor laws, where there could be the chance that a child is producing them, right? But no one sees that. Everyone just sees the shoe and the price of that shoe. And somehow this shoe has inherent within it the price that it shows. It doesn't show everything that's behind that, right? And thank you for the presentation. It's very good. And it makes me think about what we're doing broader with these podcasts, is that we're getting these almost abstruse philosophical concepts, we're presenting them, and then we're applying them to our everyday lives. This is such a, in a sense, pragmatic daily thing. Just the idea of thinking about how things, our daily things, our mundane things, actually can make us complicit to a much larger systemic evil.
Yeah,
Totally, and I think this is something that I am also reading about. Thomas Pogge, for example, he has this institutional mode of cosmopolitanism where he comes out and claims that everybody living in the Western world is complicit in the global poverty.
Yeah.
The fact that they are part of governments, of institutions, which systemically rob populations of their real
Resources.
wages, of their resources,
Yeah.
by virtue of things like, I don't know, patents, but the people working in WTO, they are committed to a very different thing. They think that by organizing patents, they're doing good to the world.
Organizing?
By organizing patents,
Patents.
yeah, they are doing a good thing, and that is something that they do.
They're
Establish
also
free trade.
participating in the banality of evil.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. You do not have to be a monster. This is exactly what I think. This is what's very relevant, and what's one of the most important findings from this thing. That you do not have. Eichmann did not have to be, devil's reincarnation
Right.
to have done that thing. All he needed was, he was not demonic himself. His motives were not, but the actual thing that he was doing was inexplicable. It was one of the worst horrors.
And that makes me question myself, and I pose the question to everyone here and to anyone who's listening. Are we Eichmann?
Yeah, that's a good question. Are we complicit?
Yeah.
Are we
Well,
just?
that's what Ward Churchill. Remember that scandal in the States? I'm not sure if you were aware of it. It wasn't a major scandal, but there was a professor at the University of Colorado who, at the time of September 11th, or later, shortly thereafter, compared the victims of September 11th. He called them little Eichmanns, quote unquote. and he lost his tenure at the university for that. There was sort of a political witch hunt that took place afterwards, and people like to blow that way out of context and be like, oh, he's calling Americans Nazis and making it their fault for having been victims of a terrorist attack. And I think that's not what he was trying to do. I think his point was, while he was making, he was using some strong rhetoric there and some strong language, I think he was trying to make the point that we're making right now, that these were people who were sitting in office places somewhere, and they were having these incredibly negative impacts on the world, and they were causing a lot of this poverty and wealth inequality and problems that then might have played a role in the reasons that these people were willing to commit terrorist attacks against the United States, and that we're all implicit in the system, and then
it's not just
reason we're all
a specific group, but to some extent we probably all are. I mean,
all complicit,
we all turn a blind eye to certain.
We all buy clothes,
things.
right?
And the thing is, what's I think so nefarious about it is that we, in a way, we cannot not be Eichmann.
Yeah, I mean the system makes us Eichmann.
I have to
just by consuming the things that you consume in our society.
Nobody's forcing you to consume.
Oh, you're just gonna stand there and die?
No, not die.
That's an option.
You could reorganize consumption, in different manners.
Right, but that requires struggle, and in that process, you still have to take part in that consumption, and in that process, you are still complicit.
Or you could join the Zapatistas, or I don't know.
Yeah, you would have to move, but that's such a radical and extreme thing to do that it's I think unfair to ask everyone to do that, not to be Eichmann.
Yeah, that's the thing. I actually, this was the point that I was. There was this. She was asked in an interview actually, Eichmann, Arendt. I'm sorry, Arendt was actually posed this question: that does this mean that we're all Eichmanns? She said this is not true. We're not all Eichmanns, but there is an Eichmann in every one of us. So she put it this way, that we're all capable of being Eichmanns when we do not exercise our capabilities to think and to judge.
I think like what Eddie was pointing out is like in a certain sense we're systematically through the system we're Eichmanns, but we're not.
But that's what like what I'm trying to say is that from this, what I understand is there could be a systemic restrictions on your capabilities to exercise your freedom to think and to judge.
Right.
Like, you, and again, I'm taking that analogy from when you were buying shoes for yourself, right? The system somehow put you in that position where you had to be an Eichmann, but what you did was you still, you went to every store, whatever you went, you did ask them, if they could guarantee that the sneakers that you're going to buy or the products that they have does not involve any child labor. So that is one of those ways that you could, kill the Eichmann in yourself. Think for yourself. Try to find an alternative. It's not that there are not any alternatives, but
actually
being
have to actively.
Exactly. You have to think. That is, I think, that is the important point that she's trying to make.
An act. Going back to her core.
And be free.
Yeah.
Think,
buy a gun.
Be free. Buy a gun. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess
this is descending into.
I mean, we're still within an hour. Is there any other points anyone wants to make about this? I mean, that's brilliant. Well done, Navas.
Yeah, well done. And for English listeners, this is how Germans
applaud in universities.
Yeah.
You want to talk about anything else? Maybe some words about all these terrorist attacks in the last 10 days?
Well, actually, I would like to remark on, I've noticed, this attack in Belgium and Brussels was equally as bad, per number of deaths as in Paris, right? Or it was...
No.
How about in comparison with Ankara?
Okay, but it was a pretty bad attack.
It was similar, yeah.
But I've noticed...
Is it comparable to Ankara?
I've noticed way fewer sort of flags, and people aren't putting a Belgian flag onto their Facebook, and I'm wondering if maybe we're becoming sort of, I don't know, getting used to it, or I'm wondering if also there after Paris there was a lot of nationalism, a lot of people showing flags and saying my heart to Paris and stuff like that. But also there was a lot of talk about, hey, why didn't we do this for Beirut? I mean, we talked about that too on the podcast. And I'm wondering maybe if actually there had been sort of an effect from all of this conversation.
Yeah, it's a good question.
I think at least the first Paris attacks, they were symbolic of something else. in the attacks on Charlie Hebdo. You know, it was what was it? Attack was the modern freedom to
Speech.
to speech, to express yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was something that, you know, that mobilized a lot of support.
Je suis Charlie Hebdo.
Charlie and all that.
It could also, I mean, just to be
it was
said,
again. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yeah,
It was
no.
again, you know, an attack on modernity in that sense that, you know, this is one of the prized modern values, the freedom to express yourself. So in that case, that was, I think that was totally something else. And today, and before today, last week, even in Turkey, you know, these are problems, or these are attacks that you could locate into. I mean, you could. Well, I think maybe it's wrong to put it this way, but you can always put them in a particular context. You know, I could think of totally this being a retaliation of what the Belgian authorities did a few days ago by capturing one of those terrorists that they captured a few days. This could be a retaliation of that.
Right.
What happened in Turkey? You could trace it back to the conflict
well, just
in Kurdish regions of Turkey and within the policy of the Turkish state. But what happened in, you know, Paris in January last year was something that was more symbolic, something that had a broader, you know, symbolism to it in its attack.
I thought ISIS took responsibility for Istanbul and also Brussels, but not Ankara.
No, not Ankara. For Ankara,
It was-
the responsibility was taken by another Kurdish organization called TAK, the Kurdish Freedom Falcons, and they are an offshoot of PKK. They split away from PKK in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken. They found PKK and their PKK's methods to be too soft for what has been going on in the country, and they do not have any problems with killing civilians. Because they think that this is a war. This is what the Turkish government is doing to Kurdish civilians,
Killing civilians.
and we have to retaliate.
Right.
I
Cool.
personally have big problems with that. I don't think this is the method. I think this also harms their own ideals, their own longing, their own strives for liberation. That's, I mean, any movement of resistance, any liberation movement holds, or at least must hold, human life to be very, very valuable, not disposable.
Right.
The moment you move away from that principle, then you are open to a lot of questioning.
Yeah.
Your integrity can become questioned.
And not only that, you become that which you're trying to fight. And
Yeah,
I think that's always the fear.
Exactly. That's exactly the thing. That what is the biggest desire of the slave? It is to become just like the master.
Right.
And this is the trap that we have to be aware of and prevent from getting into, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I do want to just add, maybe on a cynical note, maybe Paris. It resonated because we all know Paris. We all know about Paris. We all know about France. It's like a cultural center of the whole world, right? Maybe a lot of people don't know in the United States where Brussels is.
Right.
And even if they do, they probably just don't feel that connection. So that might actually explain some of the.
And how about the target of Brussels? They're attacking Europe.
Yeah.
Right. That's the capital,
right.
So to speak, of the European Union.
Yeah.
Right. And so, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
ISIS attacking the capital of Europe.
But I'm worried that we're going.
No, we're not. We have 5 minutes, actually.
5 minutes.
Yeah. Why, you don't find this interesting?
No, it's interesting. It's just, this is, you know, I mean, hour-long podcast, you know.
Yeah.
And people are lucky if they listen for 10 minutes. That's all I'm saying.
Well, let's answer that question.
I know there's two people who do listen to this. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
That's great.
Two people.
That's good. So, last question that we
That's a
close
good
with.
question. If you can stage something of this proportion in the very heart of the security machine that is the European Union, that means nobody else is exempt from it.
I
Right?
think
No one's
it
safe.
does send out this message of, you know, fear, and that is what all any form of terror is about.
Yeah, and we play
It's
into
killing,
it so well,
And-
by increasing our security measures in ways that don't make us more secure, but just
Clamping
restrict our
down-
freedoms.
Clamping down on
Exactly.
freedom,
That's what the powers that be want.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Fear.
Yeah.
Going back to guns.
All right.
Indeed.
Well, then I guess we will end this podcast.
Thank you for
very
listening.
Thank you
much.
for listening.
Yeah, subscribe.
Thank you, Cho. Thank you, Navas. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone.
Comment,
Thank you for
subscribe.
that. Share.
Share.
Yeah,
Subscribe,
go to
yeah.
our Facebook page,
Yeah, like
Moral
us.
Economy. Twitter, Moral Economicus.
Yeah.
What is it on
Facebook
podcast? It's on
website,
podcast. The
website.
Moral Economy on podcast.
I have a
on
Tumblr account too, but no one knows about that.
iTunes. Moral Economy.
iTunes, right? You
That's
can
our
find
biggest.
this podcast.
Yeah.
And if you want
And
to
all
come and
others.
discuss with us and take part in the podcast, write us.
Yeah, right.
If you want to do your own podcast, do
We
it.
support
we
it
have
too.
a Reddit as well.
Yeah, we have Reddit as well. We're not supposed to say that though. All right,
Peace.
peace.
When it's all said